Arizona does not have spring. It only has sun, pouring down like fire onto the barren rocks. That afternoon, Elias Creed was on his way back from the town of Dustwater when he saw her. She was hanging from a dried cypress tree, her wrists bound behind her back, head bowed, tangled black hair like a bird's nest covering most of her sunburned face. Beneath her feet, the cracked ground looked like a wound that would never heal. A crude sign swayed above her head, painted in blood-red letters. Thief. Must die. There was no one around. No sound of horses, no voices, only the wind. Elias pulled his hat lower and squinted. The last time he saw someone strung up like that was during the war. And even then, at least there had been a reason. But this? Just a young Apache girl, maybe 18 years old, sun-darkened skin, wrists already bleeding from the tight ropes. He was about to turn his horse away. But then she lifted her head, slowly, wearily, and her eyes found his. That look, not begging, not afraid, just a quiet gaze, like embers glowing beneath ashes. Elias lowered his hand to the old scar at his waist and drew a small knife. "Damn it," he muttered. With one smooth motion, he cut the rope. The girl collapsed like a discarded raincoat. He caught her. She was light as a dream no one believes in. Without a word, Elias wrapped her in his cloak. Behind them, the sign still swayed in the wind. But now, it was just wood. It held no more judgment. Elias returned to the ranch before the sun dipped below the horizon, carrying the girl like a man burdened by an unnamed ghost. The ranch was nothing more than a low wooden shack, roofed with old corrugated tin and walled with sand-mixed clay. Just enough to block the wind, just enough to keep the loneliness from spilling out. He laid her down on the narrow bed near the fireplace, the one that used to belong to his wife, many years ago. She was still unconscious, her cheeks hollow, lips cracked, breathing ragged. He undid the ropes, careful as someone diffusing a mine, then fetched clean water and wiped her bruises, slow and silent, like a ritual. The air was thick with quiet, no groans, only the sound of her breath, thin as ash. Around her neck, Elias noticed a necklace made of shell and wood beads, swirling patterns, the symbol of the Chiricahua tribe. As someone who once carried a rifle in war, Elias knew what such little things could mean. A family mark, an oath, or even a sentence of death. He did not touch it, just turned away, placed a pot of water on the stove, and lit the fire. The smell of burning wood and rusted iron filled the room. Something familiar. He tossed a pinch of salt into the watery stew, added some dried beans, the evening meal of a man no longer waiting for anyone. The girl let out a faint groan. Her eyes opened slightly, empty like the sky before a storm. Elias stepped closer, holding out a spoonful of broth. She turned her head away. "No one locked the door," he said, his voice dry as desert grass. "And no one's going to hurt you." She kept looking at him, but this time, it was not fear, just exhaustion. After a moment, she sipped, just a tiny bit, as if testing his truth with each drop. Elias simply nodded, then quietly stepped out onto the porch. Outside, the sunset was bleeding into the sky. The first cry of a coyote echoed from the hills. He lit a cigarette, but did not smoke it, just let the smoke drift. Inside, the faint clink of a spoon against a ceramic bowl rang out. Small sound, but enough to make him turn his head. She was eating, her eyes still watching him. Between them, silence. But this time, it was not heavy. Not like before. The next morning, just as the sun peeked over the ridge, Elias headed out to the horse corral. The grass was still wet with dew. The birds had yet to sing. But the earth was already speaking, sinking footprints near the edge of the woods. Small, delicate, winding like a snapped thread. Elias knelt down and touched the sand. A strip of red cloth caught on the barbed fence, coarse fabric, patterned with a coiled snake. Familiar, very familiar. He remembered a night at a way station 2 weeks ago. An old preacher and a fur trader had talked about the daughter of Chief Maka, the leader of the northern Chiricahua tribe, who had gone missing after a skirmish with the army. They said she wore a twisted shell necklace wrapped in red cloth, and her name was Nahila. Keeper of the fire. Elias narrowed his eyes toward the wooden shack. The girl was sitting upright, sunlight catching in her messy black hair. That necklace was still around her neck. And that red cloth, it had to be hers. He said nothing, just clenched his hand into a fist, then let it go. Far to the south, faint columns of dust rose above the desert, like ghost riders galloping through sand. Elias quietly slipped the piece of cloth into his coat pocket and walked back inside. Nahila turned to look at him, eyes expectant. Not apologetic, not grateful, just knowing. "Someone is coming," Elias said, voice barely more than a breath. "Is it dramatic, guys, if there is comment number 1? Let's continue." The town of Dustwater was not big, but rumors there spread like smoke from wet firewood. Slow, murky, and smelling of danger. That morning, Elias walked into the general store with his hat pulled low and a damp cloth draped over his shoulder. He only meant to buy salt, a few nails, and a roll of cloth to dress the girl's wounds. But every eye turned toward him with a look that was hard to read. In the corner, old Murphy, the blacksmith, whispered something to the preacher. They both stared at Elias, said nothing, did not nod. A boy tapped his fingers on a barrel of rice and said just loud enough, "He brought that Indian girl back to his ranch." Elias stayed silent, picked up what he needed, and placed it on the counter. The shopkeeper did not ask questions, but his hands trembled as he wrapped the salt. Before walking out, Elias paused, eyes fixed on the door. "Stay away from my ranch. No one needs to die just for being curious." No one replied. But that silence, that was the real threat. That afternoon, Nahila sat on a wooden chair out on the porch, eyes gazing far off toward the yucca ridges. Her hands were folded, her body still. Elias handed her the roll of cloth and a cold can of soup. "People in town have started talking," he said, voice rough and worn. She did not look at him. "What are they saying? That I'm hiding a prisoner? That I've taken an Apache girl?" Nahila let out a soft laugh, but there was no joy in it. "And that scares them?" "No," Elias answered. "It makes them want to kill you." A crow croaked harshly from the roof of the chicken coop. There was no wind, yet the tumbleweeds rolled softly across the dry earth. Everything seemed to be holding its breath before the storm. "You can turn me in," she said, still staring off into the distance. "I would not blame you." "Number," Elias stood, firm. "I've seen men like them, on the battlefield, in the market square. They do not need a reason to hang someone from a tree." Nahila turned to him, her eyes, for the first time, unguarded. "Then why did you save me?" Elias looked at her like the question itself already held the answer. He replied slowly, "Because your eyes did not beg. You are someone with fire in your soul." Then he added, "And we are about to have serious trouble." With that, he walked straight back into the house. That night, the sound of drums began around midnight. Not a fast beat, just slow, heavy thumps, like the heartbeat of the earth stirring old memories. Elias sprang up from his chair, the Winchester already in his hands before he even had time to think. Nahila was already standing on the porch, her cloak billowing gently in the night wind. Her eyes were dark and steady, not a hint of fear. "They are not here to negotiate," she said, voice dry as wind-blown sand. "Is your father leading them?" Elias asked, eyes fixed on the clearing between the pasture and the rocky hills. She nodded. "Maka. He will not say much, but every beat of the drum is a warning. After the third, arrows will fly." The drums echoed again, a second time. Elias let out a breath. He set the rifle down slowly, like a man who had just picked his own grave. "I do not want to shoot anyone tonight, especially not someone searching for their child." Nahila looked at him. "If you go out alone, they might listen. But if I go first, you cannot be sure," Elias interrupted. "I will not let you spill another drop of blood. Not for them. Not for me." Horseback silhouettes began to emerge through the mist, dark shapes shifting in and out like ghosts. Each rider wore eagle feathers, their faces painted in ash-gray streaks. They moved without a sound, as if the entire world was holding its breath. The third drumbeat sounded. Nahila stepped forward, her hand reaching for Elias's. For the first time, they touched, not out of defense, but connection. "Say nothing when you face Maka," she told him. "Let me speak." "You sure?" Elias asked. She looked at him, her gaze strangely unshaken. "I was the child they tried to hang. Now I will be the one keeping them from killing you." When Maka appeared, tall as a mountain, silver hair tied back, eyes like blades, Elias simply stood his ground, no weapon, no words, and Nahila stepped forward to face her father, a daughter caught between two worlds, a fragile voice standing before an army. The patch of land in front of the ranch had become a warrior's circle. 80 men, silent as stone, the feathers in their hair untouched by the wind. Every spear pointed at Elias, and at the past he could not erase. Maka stepped forward, unarmed, but his gaze carried the weight of an entire dry season. His skin was creased like desert bark, but his eyes were bright and cold. Nahila stood between the two men. "He did not harm me," she said in Apache, her voice low but steady. "It was the townspeople who hanged me." A young warrior shouted, "He is Wasichu. He kept the chief's daughter." His voice cracked like thunder across the plain. Maka raised a hand, and all sound vanished. He looked at Elias and spoke English, rough but clear. "White men do not save the daughters of those they fear." Elias replied, without stepping back, "I did not save her because of the color of her skin. I saved her because no one else stopped." Maka fell silent. One step, then another. He came close enough that the spear of a nearby warrior nearly grazed Elias's neck. But Elias did not move. "I found this cloth caught in my fence," Elias said, holding out a blood-stained strip of red fabric, part of what Nahila wore when she was strung up. "I kept it, because if it were my child missing, I would want some trace too." Maka took it, his eyes narrowed, his gnarled hand clenched tight. Then he turned to Nahila. "You told the truth?" She nodded. "He did not touch me, did not ask my name, or ask for anything. He just gave me soup, water, and a blanket. He truly is a good man." The young warrior shouted again. "Then why did he not bring you back right away?" Nahila answered for herself, "Because I was still too weak to walk." Maka looked back at Elias. "You fed my daughter, though you had no reason to. But words are not enough. You will come with me, to the council of elders, and speak." Elias nodded. "I will go. Just one word, and one girl caught between two bloodlines." As the council fire lit up at the forest's edge, the warrior known as Broken Spear stepped forward, pointing his spear directly at Elias. "He is a curse. End it before blood has the chance to bloom." A chorus of growls rose like a crashing wave. Elias stood in the middle of the circle, cold sweat sliding down his back. But Nahila stepped out, swatted the spear aside, and stood between him and the blades. "Be quiet." Her voice slashed through the night like a blade through cloth. Everything froze. She spoke in Apache, her words pouring like floodwater, telling of ropes, of hunger, of Elias's eyes. She told them about the photograph on the table, his wife and daughter, both dead, just as she had nearly died. The wind howled through her hair, but her voice held firm. "This man," she pointed to Elias, "is not Wasichu. He is not a warrior. He is not a shaman. He is a farmer. He is a rancher." The wind stilled, and for the first time, no one answered her with a shout. There was only silence, a silence that had begun to shift. 7 elders sat around the fire, dressed in faded deerskin, their eyes glowing like low embers in the night. Elias stood in the circle, not understanding the language. He only watched. Maka spoke first, every detail, every choice Elias had made. Then came Broken Spear, still taut as a drawn bowstring, demanding punishment to preserve the tribe's honor. Finally, Nahila stepped forward. This time, she did not shout. She simply spoke, in a voice soft as smoke. "I saw in him what we are missing, kindness without expectation." One white-haired elder asked a single question. She answered without pause. "If I had to choose again, I would still trust him, even knowing I might die." The silence stretched long, like a ritual. At last, the eldest nodded. Maka turned to Elias, his translation warm but firm. "You are spared. But more than that, from this day forward, your land will be protected. Anyone who lays a hand on you declares war on our tribe." Elias bowed his head. They left the valley at dawn, and they left in silence. No drums, no horns, only the soft sound of hooves on dew-covered grass. Nahila walked beside Elias, saying nothing, Maka followed, silent as a mountain. Back at the ranch, Elias opened the door, letting in the early morning light. The same wooden chair, the cold stove, the tilted photograph of his family. Nahila stepped inside, quietly picked up the dried flowers by the photo, and replaced them with a few fresh wild blooms she had gathered along the way. No one had taught her to do that, but she understood. Elias stood behind her, silent. When Nahila stepped out onto the porch, she paused, turned to look at Elias, her hand resting on the beaded necklace around her neck, the symbol of her clan. She took it off, walked to the table, and placed it beside the photo of his wife and child. She said nothing, just left it there. Elias looked at that small object, the spiral-patterned beads, stained with a trace of old blood. He did not touch it, just took a breath and nodded, slow and deep, like the earth itself. Nahila rode away with the warriors. She did not look back. Every year after that, on the first day of spring, an Apache woman on horseback would come to Elias's ranch. She never knocked. She would leave a bundle of dried provisions, a few wildflowers, and a scrap of leather with a message written in plain English. "Thank you. For that day you chose to save, instead of turning away." Elias never replied, but he kept every note, every flower, in a tin box under the table. When he died, those who buried him found something unusual in his coat. An old Apache necklace, worn with time, but preserved like a treasure. One act, one glance, one bowl of soup, enough to turn blood into words. Thank you for listening this far. May you always be healthy and lucky. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video.